This is what I got. A Supra with a bad alternator. Just put this ball here. So this alternator here is one expensive piece of metal. This is a 175 amp high output alternator that they made for the Supra, and the price on this is about 700 bucks. I really don't want to spend $700 for a new one. I'd rather just take it apart and check and see what went bad. Just keep the noise down and don't break her teeth. Now that I have the alternator apart, I just want to show you why I chose to fix my own alternator versus buying a new one. I mean, one, because of the price, but second, because in the actual alternator itself, apart from these components in the back, there's only really two main components. One is the stator and one is the rotor. So the rotor is in the middle here, and all it is it's pretty much a stationary part in relation to the shaft. So the only thing that can go bad in the alternator itself, mechanically, is the brushes or the bearings in the body. And I mean, as you can see here, the stator is just a set of windings. They don't move. They're just copper windings connected to these electrical pins here. So I guess these connections could break, but they're pretty stationary once they're screwed into the rectifier. So first component I want to show you is the brush set. So these brushes, this is the main component that goes bad in an alternator. So when your alternator stops charging, more than likely the brushes are bad. So these brushes wear down, doesn't make contact anymore, and stops charging. Second component I want to go over is the regulator. So what the regulator does, the regulator just regulates the voltage. It does exactly what the name says. And when your alternator is overcharging, as in my case, this is what I believe is bad without even putting a meter on it, is the regulator. The third component, last but not least, is the rectifier. And what this does is this actually takes all this voltage from these 4 pins and pulls it together in one place. And then from there, it outputs it to this little connector, copper connector, which goes connected to the positive cable, which runs to the battery. So, and this is the rectifier. And again, it does exactly what the name implies. It rectifies the voltage or fixes the voltage. So in my case, it looks like the regulator is bad. And how do I know this? By checking the regulator with this multimeter right here. And to be honest, this is the way you would check it if I actually knew the values I'm supposed to have here, but I don't. That's why when you have your alternator and it's bad, you should take it to a place like Cano so they can fix it. I bought the new regulator out of mere instinct that this was the problem because it was overcharging, and more than likely, if it's overcharging, it's the regulator and not any of the other components, and that's what I'm going off of, is basic instinct. So we will put everything back on in the reverse order that we took it off. That's usually the idea. Obviously, you know what went on, what goes on next, because you just saw the stop motion video of it coming apart, but I didn't see that video, so now I gotta remember. I think this was next. That rubber little insulator. Then the rectifier. It's the rectifier next. Can't remember if the regulator goes next or... Usually if you don't know the exact order something goes in, just try it one way, and usually all this stuff is made to fit one way most of the time. And you could probably figure it out. And I believe this is the way it goes. Rectifier, regulator, brushes on top. So I'm gonna put this together, and pretty sure this is the right way.
The other day I met a bear up in the woods away up there.
All right, so that's it.
I looked at him, I looked at him, he sized up me, he sized up me, I sized up him, I sized up him, he looked at me, I looked at him, he sized up me, I sized up him.
Now it's time to put the alternator back on the car. I'm gonna try to slide this through here. Barely fits. Oh, and definitely, if you're attempting to put an alternator back on or take it out, make sure the battery cable is disconnected, because if that sucker right here, if these cables right here touch ground, you have some serious burns unless you have a fuse in the system, which a lot of cars don't. There's one idler stud and there's one bolt that hold the alternator in place, and that is pretty much all that holds this alternator in, thanks to the wonderful engineers who designed the Toyota Supra. It's very easy, very easy. It's one of the easiest alternators I've ever done, ever. Let's just clip this in here. Funny enough, when I put my battery in the back of the car, I added this fuse right here. Just for that reason. Just in case something touches ground. And since I have the battery mounted in the trunk, if that thing touched ground and that whole cable started heating up, it would probably burn my whole car to a crisp. This particular nut can't go too tight because that stud, that contact stud, is made out of copper, maybe some other materials, but it's not very strong. It's pretty soft metal, so if you over tighten it, it'll break that stud for sure. All I got left is to put this serpentine belt on and then get it from behind the belt. There you go, just makes it by like a millimeter. Perfect. Now it's time to start the car and make sure it's charging okay. Now I'm going to check and make sure it's charging okay, and this is what I got, about 14.5, 14.7 volts. It seems a little bit high to me, but this is the battery that got damaged, so it's probably not putting much of a load on the alternator. I'm going to check with the guys at Cano and make sure that this voltage is where it's supposed to be. This is the original regulator that I got off of the alternator, and you probably can't read it, but this is a transpole regulator, and that's the OEM supplier for that part to the manufacturer. And this is the part that I picked up from Cano, and as you can see, it's also a transpole regulator. So this is an OEM part. A place like Cano, they don't use garbage, they use OEM parts versus generic replacement components. So that's the biggest difference. And obviously if you have an antique car or an exotic car or something like that, you want OEM parts so you're not in the middle of nowhere and your car breaks down. That's kind of top priority.